So we'll get started here, and Professor Alani Faola will present will be the moderator for this session.
All right, thank you very much. Welcome back, and we'll start right away. So we have colleagues from KNUST University and University of Rwanda here to present. So as indicated, the first person will present online, and we are glad to have Loretta Oduro. She will be talking about fresh and spoiled tomato as some comparative study. If you are there, you can carry on. Thank you very much.
My name is Loretta Oduro. I'm a graduate of Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. I'll be sharing with you findings of my research, which is titled A Comparative Study on Phytochemical, Nutritional Composition and Microbial Loads of Fresh and Spoiled Tomatoes. This research was conducted under the supervision of Professor Faustina Dufi Rekumenu and Dr. Joseph Okono-Akowa. I'll be taking you through the introduction and problem statement. We will also look at the relevance of the study through to conclusion and finally our references. Tomatoes have high store of nutrients and phytochemicals and are also the most commonly consumed vegetable in Ghana. Research has shown that tomatoes produced in Ghana is less than the domestic demand. Yet, a high percentage of about 37.5 is lost to post-harvest loss. This is evidence that there are high tons of tomatoes that go waste every year. But then the big question remains that what actually happens to the wasted fruit, or what are they used for? Studies have indicated that there is a rise in the consumption of spoiled tomatoes in Ghana, because they are cheaper on the market as compared to the fresh tomatoes. Although such tomatoes are consumed, do they actually confer health benefits to their consumers? Certainly, the nutritional and phytochemical value of spoiled tomatoes are lacking. And then although the alarming reports from several studies have established that indeed, spoiled tomatoes have high levels of pathogenic microorganisms, but people still remain adamant and consume spoiled tomatoes. The study will therefore provide information on the safety of consumption of spoiled tomatoes in Ghana. It will also create awareness among the public and also direct policy on the consumption and use of spoiled tomatoes. And also finally, the study will provide information on the nutritional and phytochemical value of spoiled and fresh tomatoes, and also to ascertain whether spoiled tomato is safe for consumption. The research sought to compare the nutritional and phytochemical composition of fresh and spoiled tomatoes, and for the aim to be achieved, the phytochemical and nutritional composition of fresh and induced spoiled tomatoes were determined. We also determined the nutritional and phytochemical composition of spoiled tomatoes that were sampled from the open market. And then lastly, the microbial loads associated with the spoiled tomatoes were determined. The study was conducted in 2 phases. In phase 1, fresh Roma tomatoes, which is actually one of the tomato varieties, were purchased from a known market. And then a fraction of the fresh tomatoes was induced to spoilage. Laboratory analysis was carried on the fresh and the induced spoiled samples. In phase 2, 6 spoiled tomato samples were randomly purchased from the same market. Laboratory analysis was conducted to compare the nutritional and phytochemical values of the spoiled tomatoes to samples in phase 1. The nutrients analyzed were whole fiber, vitamin C, folate, and potassium. Phytochemicals were mainly lycopene, beta-carotene, and chlorogenic acid, while the microbial analysis comprised total viable and total aerobic counts, as well as the isolation of Staphylococcus aureus and E. coli. Findings of the study showed that the level of moisture in the spoiled tomatoes, whether induced or sampled from the market, was low compared to what was found in the fresh tomatoes because they were intact compared to the spoiled tomatoes which had lost water from open surfaces. And now on the sample codings, F indicates fresh tomatoes, IS for the induced spoiled tomatoes, and S1 to S6 for randomly sampled tomatoes. Crude fiber content in the spoiled tomatoes was higher than what was recorded in the fresh tomatoes. Therefore, a comparison was made between the moisture content and the crude fiber content. We realized that when moisture was high, crude fiber levels decreased. So this suggests that the lower moisture content recorded in the spoiled tomatoes is a contributing factor to the higher yields in crude fiber. Furthermore, Mati et al. In 2018 reported that fiber in tomatoes are non-biodegradable on spoilage. This explains why the crude fiber levels were high at spoilage. Unlike crude fiber, vitamin C degrades along tomato spoilage because it is sensitive to heat, which is generated during the process of spoilage. And this could have accounted for the reduction of vitamin C in the spoiled tomatoes. Hence, the value of vitamin C recorded in the fresh tomatoes was higher than what was recorded in the spoiled tomatoes. While the folate content of fresh tomatoes was 0.3 milligram per 100 gram, that of spoiled tomatoes was 0.4 milligram per 100 gram. But then actually, folate levels differ widely between food sources, with the highest levels found in green vegetables and some fruits such as banana. But in generally, tomato has low folate content. However, higher levels were recorded in spoiled tomatoes due to the release of folate bioenzymes at late ripening. Fresh tomatoes had higher chlorogenic acid content of 0.74 milligram per 100 gram, whilst spoiled tomatoes recorded a low chlorogenic acid content. This is possibly because chlorogenic acid degrades as tomato undergoes spoilage. Carotenoid content in spoiled tomato was higher than what was recorded in the fresh tomatoes. That is because there is an advancement in ripening, which increases carotenoid synthesis in tomatoes during spoilage. Now, the pictures we see here are tomato samples at different stages of spoilage. We have the fresh Roma tomato, and then bruised spoiled tomato. Place 3 is a slightly broken with deep cut tomato. Then we have the deeply broken tomato. We also have the broken with juice oozing, and then broken with juice or foul smell. Plate 7 is the induced spoiled tomatoes. These tomatoes are all sold on the market, and especially commercial food operators are mostly found patronizing such tomatoes. Some individuals too prefer these tomatoes because they are cheaper than the fresh tomatoes. Now, Ghana Standards Authority, the regulatory body that has the mandate of establishing standards to ensure high quality of goods produced in Ghana, whether for local consumption or for export, has established allowable thresholds for food commodities. And anything beyond that measure is rendered unsafe for human consumption. Therefore, Comparing the microbial loads of studied samples to the Ghana Standard Authority threshold values, all spore tomatoes from open markets recorded exceedingly high levels of microorganisms, unlike the fresh tomatoes. Yeast and mold counts were extremely too numerous to count in the spored tomatoes. Again, 4 samples contained E. coli, of which the fresh tomato wasn't part. Therefore, the results support earlier reports that spored tomatoes is not safe for human consumption due to its associated high microbial loads. In conclusion, the study has shown that spored tomatoes have higher nutritional and phytochemical values. However, they are equally highly contaminated by microbes and therefore are not safe for human consumption. Since we can't consume the spored tomatoes, value therefore should be added to increase its shelf life and also render it safe for consumption since they contain a high amount of nutrients and phytochemicals. Most consumers of spored tomatoes believe that cooking destroys microorganisms present in the spored tomatoes. I therefore would recommend that the study be improved upon with an additional sample, but in this time it will be subjected to a source of heat, example, cooking or any method of cooking, to ascertain whether it will destroy the microorganisms as claimed. And also different phytochemicals and nutrients in tomatoes could also be studied. These are pictures of tomatoes that were purchased from the market and the samples that were used for the research. I'd like to say thank you to the organizers of this conference and the consortium. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share and gain knowledge. And also to my audience, I would say a big thank you for your time and attention. God bless you.
Thank you very much.
And these are some references that were used for this study.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you can hear me, thank you, Loretta. We really enjoy your presentation. If you can just stay by, we'll run through other presentation and then we can have a Q&A session. Thank you very much. Very, 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 very interesting presentation. Oh, so we will move on to the second presenter, Mr. Henry Botan. He will be telling us about the economics of dryer, right? I will look forward to your presentation.
Good morning once again. My name is Henry Ampedu Botan, and I'm presenting on the topic, economic and financial analysis of a flatbed maize dryer using a biomass heat source. Okay. In Ghana, maize is predominantly produced by smallholder farmers who mainly use the open sun drying method. And this method is considered as the cheapest method and is widely adaptable by smallholder farmers. This method has major setbacks as grains are exposed during drying. And as a result, they make it susceptible to contamination and sometimes fungal infestation. Also, using the open sun method is labor intensive. It requires large area for spreading, as we can see in plate 1, and also the need for stirring, which is time consuming, as is seen in plate 2. And this makes it unreliable, leading to uneven drying and causing fungal or microorganism contamination. Sometimes eminent rains get the rain soaked and prolonged drying time, which also increases mold growth. And this as a result, increases post-harvest loss and waste. However, there are options of mechanized conventional dryers considered appropriate. But these dryers, however, work or operate on fuel or gas, which is not economically feasible to a smallholder farmer, though it could be fast and produce better quality products. Challenges associated with the open sand drying method, and to provide alternative for this method. Research from Sub-Saharan Africa looking into smallholder farmers or providing suitable drying technologies that are affordable for smallholder farmers, focuses on building a small or developing a small capacity dryer that are suitable to the needs of a smallholder farmer. So therefore, we seek to determine the financial viability of this installed 3-ton capacity flatbed meter using these financial indicators such as the net present value, internal rate of return, and payback period. A new fabricated biomass flatbed dryer is set up at a small farming community called Consortium, a suburb at Techima, on the traditional zone of Ghana. Figure 1 shows an installed dryer with biomass burner furnace, and A is the biomass burning in the furnace. Figure 2 shows how hot air is extracted from the burner furnace into the planing to the drying bed with the aid of an ID fan. To assess the financial analysis, some mathematical equations such as the net present value, payback period, internal rate of return, and cost-benefit ratio were used. An economical analysis was investigated, and table 1 shows the detailed list of capital cost of the dryer, which comprises of the drying bed, the burner furnace, the structure, and the blower or the ID fan. And in total, we had 35,000 Ghana cedis. Also, for one to operate a dryer, we cannot ignore the operation and maintenance costs. So table 2 shows the operational and maintenance costs of the dryer. And we can see the cost of electricity, the salary of the workers, and the overhead expenses cost, which amounts to 3,080 cedis. And the total revenue generated was 22,000. An economic appraisal was considered using the economic indicators such as the NPV, IRR, and the payback period to find or to measure the financial viability of the dryer and see how the investment is profitable. Figure 3 shows the variation of the NPV and internal rate of return over the years of operation. We can see from the figure that at the initial, the year 0, where the year 0 is negative, that's depicts the initial or the investment cost. And at the year 2, the investment was recouped. That represents the payback period. And to the 15th year, an NPV, that's the money gained, 64,000 from this simulation. And we could see that the investing in this dryer is viable. Also, due to Ghana's fluctuation economy, sensitivity analysis was done on the operation to measure the profitability and to assess the economic indicators, the change in economic indicators for the to measure the contribution of achieving the investment goal or the investment goal. Table 3 shows the variation of the economic indicators in relation with price charged per bag of dried maize. The red shows the base units used. From the simulation, we could see that as price increases, the NPV increases, the rate of return, internal rate of return increases, the benefits ratio also increases, whilst the payback period decreases. Similarly, table 4 shows variation of the economic indicators in relation with discount rate. And we could see from the table that as discount rate increases, so the NPV and the BCR also depreciate. Table 5 shows the variation of the economic indicators in relation with the investment cost. And we could see that as the investment cost increases, the net present value decreases, and the IRR and the benefits, it decreases alongside with the IRR and the BCR, whilst the PBP increases. From this, we can say that after 2 years of investing in this flatbed dryer with internal rate of 54, a net present value of 64,000 was gained, making this investment successful or viable. And the economic analysis gives reference or confidence to farmers and investors for adoption and scale up. The adoption and commercialization of this drying system will also promote food security through reduction of post-harvest losses, mainly encountered due to lack of this suitable drying units for smallholder farmers. Special appreciation goes to the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research and the Rockefeller Foundation for supporting this research. Thank you.
Henry, thank you. And thanks for presenting right on time. We'll move to the next one. And our presenter, okay, great, thank you. The next presenter is Anna Benjamin. So Anna adopted the yield-wise model, and you want to tell us a story about the impact on post-harvest loss and livelihood, right? Maize smallholder farmers. Thank you very much. Thank you.
My name is Anand Benjamin. I'm presenting on the yield-wise model adoption on post-harvest loss reduction and livelihood of smallholder farmers in the Wa municipality of Ghana. Maize is one of the most important cereal crops in Ghana. A lot of smallholder farmers in the northern part of Ghana are usually engaged in the production of maize. And a total of 3.06 million tons of maize is produced annually, according to the Ministry of Food and Agriculture. And most of these high 3.06 million tons of maize is usually lost due to improper storage and handling, exposing the grains to mycotoxin concentration. In line with this, the Rockefeller Foundation developed the yield-wise model to help solve this high amount of post-harvest losses in maize. Then in 2017, a crop aggregation center in the Upper West region of Ghana adopted this yield-wise model to help reduce post-harvest losses in maize. The whole concept about this yield-wise model is to build on existing relationship between value chain actors. These value chain actors are the agro dealers and farmers and then processors and buyers. Now, what Antica Crop Aggregation Center did was that they made these farmers form farmer-based organizations, where a farmer-based organization consists between 10 to 15 farmers. What they do is that they give the farmers, the small-scale farmers, they give them inputs, they give them training on agronomic practices. They also provide them with tractor services and training on post-harvest losses and how to control all these post-harvest losses. Then after the farmer receive all these things from the aggregation center, after harvesting, you are made to give an amount in monetary terms. If maybe the whole total cost of the inputs they gave you was 1,500, after harvesting, the crop aggregation center comes to you and pick a maize equivalent of that value from you. The objectives of this research was to investigate the adoption of the model on post-harvest loss reduction and livelihood of small-scale farmers in the Wa municipality. The specific objectives were to investigate the fastest influence in the adoption of the yield-wise model in the Wa municipality by these smallholder farmers, and examine the extent to which the yield-wise model has influenced post-harvest loss reduction in the Wa municipality, and assess how the model has improved the livelihood of smallholder maize farmers under the yield-wise model. Now, this research was done in two folds. The first part, or the first phase, is the survey. We did a survey by administering questionnaires to 150 persons in the municipality. This comprises of 140 farmers and 10 Antica crop aggregation managers. The second phase was a field experiment where we were trying to assess the post-harvest losses, that is the harvest losses, shelling losses, and the transportation losses. And then the final one was the storage losses. Now for the harvesting losses, what we did was that we actually randomly selected 5 farmers that had farm sizes of 4 acres each. 10 of them were farmers under Antica using the yield-wise model. Another 5 of them were farmers who were in the municipality but were not benefiting from the Antica's yield-wise model. So we use these equations we use the first equation to find out the total loss. That is the total harvest. We made the farmer go in, harvest in his own way, after which we send another group that went to do the cleaning. So to find the total losses, we subtracted the first harvest from the total harvest. That is the first harvest plus the cleaning. Then we did the shelling losses where the farmer was mostly, those under Antica were using the mechanized shellers to do the shelling. But those with who were not with Antica were using, the bag beating and other methods of shelling to do it. So this was how we were able to determine the shelling losses. Then for the storage losses, we again identified 5 farmers who were still under Antica and 5 who were not benefiting from Antica. What we did was that we made them store 5 kg bags of maize between the period of 30th November to 30th March, where each month we took 5 grams of maize from each of the 4 bags. Then from the 5 grams, we counted to know how many bags, how many grains of seeds of maize were there, how many maize had holes in them, and how many live insects were found in these maize. So that was the second part of our study. So for the factors influencing the adoption of the yield-wise model, we realized that timeliness of input supply was one of the highest the respondents gave us, followed by access to extension services, then availability of recommended inputs. Then We went to the impact of the EY's model on post-harvest losses. Then from here, the blue bars shows farmers who were under Antica, and the brown bars are farmers who are in the municipality but not benefiting from Antica's yield-wise model. So you could see that the harvest losses, those under Antica, were actually drastically lower than that of those not benefiting from the yield-wise model. Then the sharing losses also gave the same, but for the transport losses, the figure was so marginal of 0.62 and 0.68 comparatively between Antica and non-Antica farmers. And the storage losses also give 10 for Antica and 23 kilograms per hectare for non-Antica farmers. And these are the impact of the yield-wise model on the livelihood of smallholder farmers in the municipality, where about 30.4 of them said they were household food secured after joining Antica. Another 26.5 said they are now able to pay the school fees of their wards. 17.1 of them are able to purchase motorbikes because they can store their maize after harvesting for a longer period and sell them at periods where there's good price for the maize. So comparatively, the yield-wise model has helped improve on the livelihood of these farmers in the municipality. So factors such as timely of input supply, ready market, access to extension service, availability of recommended input, training on post-harvest losses were identified to influence the adoption of the yield-wise model by small-scale farmers. Availability of recommended input was the main influencing factor here. Whilst provision of input services and training program under yield-wise model had impacted on the harvesting and post-harvest reductions, where the model caused an average of 25.66 reduction in post-harvest losses, 19.7% reduction in shelling losses, and trashing losses were reduced to about 54.99%. So in total, the yield-wise model has helped improve on the livelihood of these small-scale farmers who are working with Antica in the Wa municipality. Thank you very much. Thank you. I also use the opportunity to thank the foundation for the support during the research work. Thank you very much.
So we'll move from, let me just put it here. From maize to dairy, I have my colleague here, Kisisto, to share his knowledge and what he has found with regards to aflatoxin. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ola. Today, I'm just going to share what we have been doing with Dr. Maya for the last, how many years now? 5, more than 5. So it's kind of now a summary of what we have been doing. So this is a summary that I'm just going to share with you of the 2 projects funded by Livestock Systems Innovation Lab to the University of Florida. The first one was completed in September 2018. And then the second one with the COVID or challenges was completed last year in September, December. So Dr. Maya was the principal investigator, and then we put all this together with Dr. Erin Bowers, and then assistant professor at Iowa State University as well. So for more information, maybe I'm not just going to cover everything, but this is back in December 2016 during the innovation platform meeting. So yeah, there is a link, you can go there, and there's a couple of other materials from this project. So before we get started, I just want to share with you the 2 figures. The first one is the cereal production, then on your right, it's now the milk production. You can see from 2007 up to 2018, from the last 10 years, the CO production in Rwanda has increased twofold, more than twofold, thanks to some programs, for instance, the crop intensification program, which means the more you're increasing now the CO production, for sure, the more you have many challenges in terms of post-harvest. On the other hand, you can see like now the milk production. This is some figures I took from the Agricultural Public Institution, so RAB, Rwanda Agriculture Board, where you have like now the milk production increasing significantly. You can see that by 2024, they're targeting like more than 1 million metric tons of milk. So why are aflatoxins? So in the previous grant, so we're targeting like now 2 mycotoxins, aflatoxins and then mycotoxins. So these are metabolites produced by fungi. For instance, aflatoxin are produced by Aspergillus flavus, and then sometimes with Aspergillus parasiticus. And then the key issue, and then why we are interested in this, they are carcinogenic substances. I'll come to this on the next slide. And then we're also targeting now fumonigens produced by another type of fungi, for instance, Fusarium, but they have an impact also in humans, but also in the animals, like neurotube defect, but they're involved in reconfirmation in a horse, and then but also in pig and things like that. And then, but also if human can get exposed directly or indirectly, directly one, they're consuming contaminated crops, for instance, maize, but also through now animal source food. For instance, I will come to this in the next slide. So mycotoxin issues, it's everywhere, as you can see on this figure, from the feed up to the consumption. At each stage, you may have like now the contamination. So you can see from the storage, processing, distribution, everywhere. If you are not really controlling now mycotoxin, you have now challenges. So this is a couple of now, I took now this infographic from the USAID website. So aflatoxins are involved in are causing liver cancers, and then some estimation 10% in Africa, so of liver cancer in Africa and then in Asia. So at the same time, some studies, not all of them, but some start now linking aflatoxin to stunting. So this is another challenge. I know there's no really an agreement on that, but a couple of studies now start now highlighting the importance maybe probably between aflatoxin and then stunting in terms of economic value. So you can see how Africa was losing in terms of trading with the EU due to aflatoxin contamination. So this is for humans, but if you feed now your dairy cow with a contaminated feed, and then you have aflatoxin B1, which will be metabolized and then transformed into another form of aflatoxin, for instance, M1, and then to be excreted in milk. So here it has been estimated like now up to 60% of aflatoxin, which is consumed by cow, may be metabolized into aflatoxin M1. So a couple of consequences, the same as have been previously in the milk, once you're consuming now contaminated milk. So you may be exposed, but also you have an impact on low milk production. So why this study? The first one we submitted this proposal, there is no any study where you can find this kind of information, the level of contamination. So if you don't have data, it means that maybe you're underestimating the risk. And then this will lead to inappropriate policy or some action that you may take, impact humans and then animals as well, but also sometimes impairment of product on the international market. And then recently, this was the case last year between Uganda and then Tanzania in terms of trading due to aflatoxin issues in maize. So our objective was first to assess the prevalence of aflatoxin and fumonisin in feed. Second, and then I will come to this, which was very important, was to establish a mycotoxin lab at the University of Rwanda using the low-cost equipment, raise awareness, contamination, and provide input to regulatory framework and regarding mycotoxins. So to these objectives, during one of innovation platform meeting, it was suggested maybe to take some mixed samples and then to analyze now aflatoxin M1. So in terms of results, so we corrected. So since we didn't have any baseline, and then we have been changed where there's some reviewers asking about now the sample size. So, and then we ended up now correcting more than 3,000 samples. And then because we're analyzing like now for aflatoxin and then fumonisins, and then performing more than 7,000 tests. So which was really huge. And then since it was being suggested, we collected 170 mg samples during one round. While here, these 3,000 samples, they were collected in the 5 rounds. So this is a countrywide, some dairy, cattle farmers, poultry farmers, feed vendors, and feed processors. So we try to target the entire value chain. But as you can see, we have few dairy cattle farmers. It means that everyone was not using like now the maize bran as the source of concentrate. So they were using grasses. So this is a more who are really in this business, instead of having your traditional cow in your household, things like that. This is what we have seen. So this is it does represent now the 6 rounds, I'm sorry. So the first one in Hebrew, this is the first round, and then we corrected maybe was in March, and then the lowest here we corrected was during this period, like June. And then you can see the trend was reducing and then it goes up. So what does it mean? So the first round we corrected during the rain season. It's where you have humidity, raining, and things like that. While here, the lowest, round 3, samples were corrected after harvest. So the time which means there is low contamination comparing to others period. So for now, fumonisins, so now the contamination was very low. If we try to compare with the guidance for corn in animal feeds, standard established by US FDA, you can see we were a little bit below now this level. So regarding now the milk, so you can see and then this heat will depend on which standard, and then this is a challenge with the mycotoxins. If you are comparing with the USFDA standard, or you're comparing with that in Rwanda, at least in East Africa that you're using, or you are comparing with European standard, you can see here more than 90+% of samples that we collected, they were above of now EU standard. However, the most of them here, so they are like now the total, like less than 40. So they are really below at least the East African and then USFDA standard. Yes, yeah. So this is a couple of now some papers, some output. So this is our papers if you need more information. And then this is now the policy brief we submitted to the Ministry of Agriculture. So for the second objective, so there is a problem. How can we intervene? So if you remember, I showed you like now we have contamination during the entire value chain. And then most of the farmers, they don't have any control over this value chain. So the one intervention that we propose in the second grant, it was like now using binders. So this is a couple of now the definition, which they decrease now by binding, they decrease their bioavailability and then decrease the aflatoxin M1 secretion in the milk. So here we have two groups, and then we selected like 42 dairy farmers for the group that were part of the previous project, and the one group which was control. And then the second group, we distributed the binders and then some education materials, and then we did it for a period of 4 months. So feed and then milk samples were collected in the 5 rounds. So, and then analyzed for B1 and then M1. So this is result for B1. So this is again source data from last year. You can see we still have really high contamination of aflatoxins. So since we didn't have, and then here in the control here, it's what we established as our baseline. And then in red, it's now the treatment, and then blue, the control group. So you can see there is no really significant difference. We still have high contamination. However, when we came to now M1 contamination, yes, our intervention showed that you can reduce aflatoxin contamination in the milk. However, if we consider like now on average basis, like now here the regulatory limit, you can see that most of samples, they were below these limits, which means, and then here it does really explain the period where we collected these samples. This was the most of the time we collected during the rainy season from September to December. So, and then during this time, they are really using grasses and comparing to what we have seen during the dry season. So awareness, we created like now some in a collaboration with Sarbo. So in addition to some paper-based materials that we created previously, we translated these YouTube videos in Kinyarwanda. So up so far, and then we have more than 3,000 views on social media. And then this article here, it has been featured by the Voice of America in Kinyarwanda. So, and then from here, from the website, we have more than 2,000 views and things like that. So yeah, they made an article on this. So what is the way forward? So we're preparing a manuscript for this, the second research grant, but also a policy brief. And then since we have all this equipment to establish, I will say, a low-cost based mycotoxin lab. So an MOU has been 2 months now signed between Texas A&M, Agri-Life Research, and then between University of Rwanda. And then the next step is to operationalize now this mycotoxin lab. So because the challenge is with the official national lab, so they're using HPLC, which means technically they'll be charging like $170 per sample, which is a little bit expensive. So we be proposing an alternative way to analyze now mycotoxin using some low cost equipment. And then lastly, as Dr. Maya said, so based on our previous projects with the other colleagues at the University of Rwanda and then University of Florida, so we have this proposal together, this project that we're implementing actually, which was really written based on our previous grants. So this is a disclaimer from Livestock System Innovation Lab. So I'd like to thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Kisiso. And so we have an opportunity to now ask questions until 12:30, I believe. So questions, can I call all the presenters to come forward? All the presenters, you can say all the presenters should please come forward. Do we have questions for them?
Good morning, good afternoon, rather. I am Motlamin Job, PhD student, Food and Post-Service Engineering 4th year. Thank you for presentation, and it's very laudable. I have a question for the financial analysis of a flat dryer. You can quite agree with me. Developing countries like Gambia, Ghana are facing what we call hidden hunger. When I mean hidden hunger is food is available, but the nutrients are not available in the food. And in so doing, This reminds me, any technology that you produce or you present, you must factor the availability of the nutrients within the food material. Yes, you have come up with the flat dryer, but after all that thorough investigation, have you gone beyond investigating the nutrients available after the drying process? That's very key, and it's very utmost in our daily life food consumption.
Yeah, thank you.
Second one is okay.
Thank you. The dryer was tested in one of the community that predominantly produces maize. But in Ghana, we have two major seasons. We have the major season and the drying season. The major season, maize really does well there. But most Ghanaians don't really do the major season because of the intermittent raining during that time. We have very short or lean droughts for drying. So at the place we conducted, or where mostly the major season is, and where we conducted the experiment, it's been successful over there because this time around they produce and get the good yields as they rather concentrate on the lean season. So when they get a yield, they bring it to the facility, preserve it, dry it, and at first the rate at which they get deterioration with their maize, now everything is changed with the dryer set over there. So I know it's successful over there. So if we can adopt and increase it, it's going to help, as you said, in Gambia too.
Can I go ahead? Yes, I was looking at your dollar, the exchange rate, 5 point something. When was that? Would it be the same if you did the analysis today? Thank you.
It was the experiment was conducted 2019. So as at that time, it was 5.45. But now, with our inflation, I think when we convert it at this time or at this juncture, it will still be the same. The dryer will be variable. No, I've not converted or tried this. I did it 2019. Thank you.
Got a question for the first presenter. Let's see. If you are online and you have a question, can you let us know by just signifying with the raise hand button? Otherwise, we'll continue from here. So you have a question.
Thank you, Loretta, for the first presentation. I have a question for you. In your conclusion, you're saying that you may recommend now the sport tomato are unsafe for human consumption based on some pathogen that you detected. But my question is, why, if we are cooking these tomatoes, and then most of the time, if we are cooking them very well, or pathogen will be destroyed. So I don't know if you consume salads here, maybe do you deal with the risk? So why don't you recommend cooking spoiled tomatoes if now the pathogen pathogens are the only concern that you have identified? Thank you.
Yeah, the network is, you were saying something.
So what I was trying to say is that we have a lot of people consuming a lot of small tomatoes because of economic reason, and sometimes the volume, people want more, and it's cheaper compared to the fresh tomatoes. So the idea was to ascertain whether there's some microbial contamination when it comes to consumption of spoiled tomatoes. So what the work looked at wasn't cooked or boiled tomatoes. So in terms of further research, we want to really look if indeed it's cooked as you are suggesting, whether we'll still have, I mean, the perception is that when you cook, there might not be any microbes, but then of course there are certain microbes that are certain temperatures, maybe they might still be present. And so that is what the further recommendation will seek to do. But then for those who consume salad, in terms of there's the likelihood that if you're not careful, you'll be getting some kind of contamination from that. Yeah.
Great, thanks. You might also want to consider heavy metals, things that even after cooking, you will still find in your
Absolutely.
product. Yes, we've got one here from Dirk.
So Anand, right? You did the work up in the Wa region, and this Antica group that you were talking about. Can you tell us a little bit more about that group? Is that a farmer cooperative, or who organizes that? Who owns it? Tell us a little bit more about that particular group.
The Antica Group is actually a limited liability company that was formed in 2004. So they actually started as they have farms where they do mostly maize. But along the line, they realized that they had to support the small scale farmers with the introduction of the EOS model. So they actually moved into the EOS model because they are the major suppliers of maize for senior secondary schools in the northern part of Ghana. So they were not meeting their demands for supplying maize to these secondary schools. So they had to sublet some of their the total amount they have to meet yearly for these schools. So they formed these farmer organizations, support them with these inputs, agrochemicals, tractor services, trainings. Then when the farmers harvest, they send their vehicles to the field to take the amount that is due Antica. Then if the farmers wants to sell to them, they still buy from the farmer at the prevailing market price. Then they in turn bring it to their warehouses located in various places within the Wa municipalities. Then they rebag them into these hermetic bags. Then they keep them till when government wants them to supply to the secondary schools and to Nestle Ghana. These are the two suppliers of Antica Crop Aggregation Center.
Thank you. I have a question for Kizito. Kizito, you're doing a great job over there, and I think your findings can actually influence policy, and change the system, especially with regards to food safety. How did you manage to bring the policymakers on board in this project, and how long do you think this project will actually take to implement a change that you desire?
Yeah, so yeah, good question. So are you asking me how long should take to bring our policy makers together to now? So I can tell you from 2016, so with the support of Livestock Innovation Lab, we had a couple of workshops on aflatoxins issues, where I was able to present a result and then showing the way forward. In addition to this, the Ministry of Agriculture now understand the current challenge. So now back in 2019, I was not there, I was completing my PhD, but they established kind of what they called aflatoxin working group, where they're bringing people from the private sector, NGOs, or this public institution together. So before COVID, this is all the last meeting. Before COVID, they were discussing what can get done. And then I was involved in the action plan and then things like that. And then maybe I didn't have time just to discuss everything, but under this MOU with the Texas A&M, we are thinking now engaging, and this is also one requirement of the Dr. Herman, one requirement that we have to engage public institutions in this lab. Yes, it should be based at the University of Rwanda, but it has to serve for the leveraging other efforts in these public institutions. It's where I am, so maybe he's coming to Rwanda in August. We're discussing with the public institutions now, in terms of leveraging the equipment that we have, what they're doing, and then helping mirrors around in Kigali, so they can get say their samples. Yeah, there are a couple of different initiatives. The other one, so I was with the Rwanda Standard Board. They're thinking to conduct kind of risk assessment. The one that you are thinking it's on mycotoxins. So like, for instance, aflatoxins. What is the risk? Where is the risk? How can you leverage these resources based on risk for the entire value chain? So it's where we are. I know it's really a wrong way, but we're keep pushing.
Thank you, sir.
My question to Dr. Kizito. When we feed the maize, which is infected by aflatoxin to the animals, you are suggesting that that is transmitted through the food chain. That's what you're listing. But where we are, humans are competing for maize, you know, with animals, that's where you get a problem. What policy do you have in reducing the maize feed to the animals and increase, you know, the fodder feed to the animals so that that danger of, you know, transmitting the aflatoxin through the milk to humans can be reduced? Do you have any policy on feeding the animals on grass, which is their natural feed anyway, so that we can reduce the maize feed to the animals?
Okay, if I do understand the question correctly, so you're asking, so since you are competing with the animals on the same resources, for instance, maize, why should we keep feeding using like now the maize ingredient for animals so we can give him the grass? So yeah, basically what do we want? Do we want to increase the milk production? Then we have to go back on dairy nutrition, because maize concerns the source of energy. So the more increasing energy, the more increasing the milk production. And then the other thing, I don't know for here in Ghana, but in Rwanda, yes, we're competing with animals, but the most of the time what they are really feeding animals, it's like now we're making what we call kawunga or ugali in Kenya. So like with the maize flour, and then we're taking the maize bran out. This is what is fed to animals. So the most of people were not eating the maize bran. And then you can see now this, based on the process, how they are removing the maize bran, it's highly contaminated with this. Yeah, this is one, but in terms of now dairy nutrition, yeah, we need energy. So because grasses cannot give such energy. So yeah, but the most of the time it's now the maize bran instead of now the whole maize that you are using, at least in Rwanda.
Well, just to follow up on the policy issues, do you have a policy on stakeholder engagement, that you engage your stakeholders, and who pays for that? Because the difficulty of when you are doing things and bringing stakeholders, there's a lot of financial issues. How do you manage that in Rwanda?
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, with the aflatoxin working group, so that which was established, it has been supported by AGRA at the time. But the overall goal is like now have this platform, whatever resources where they can come from. I know sometimes they used to be supported by WFP, but at that time when this initiative was in place, AGRA was supporting this, now this. Yeah. Otherwise, this is what I have seen. Maybe the grant was completed. I cannot tell because I'm not working for the Ministry of Agriculture, but they have a couple of other partners that they are working with, because now with the WFP is also interested in mycotoxin issue and the things like that. So yeah, the previous one that I was mentioning, it was AGRA who was supporting this initiative.
Okay, this is to Loretta. Thank you for the excellent presentation and congratulations. One comment is that you do total count of bacteria, but it can contain various pathogens like Salmonella, which you don't quantify specifically, and some bacterial toxins can resist cooking. So this can cause diarrhea, mainly with the elderly and young, very young infants. So this is something to look at in the future if the elderly and the young children are negatively affected by spoiled tomato. So thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Anna. That was a recommendation. Thank you. Do we have any questions?
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, we've got time.
Thank you. Question for Henry. I was wondering, maybe I missed it in your presentation. You did some modeling and constructing of the flatbed dryer. I was wondering, how did you decide on the capacity or the size of the flatbed dryer? And did you also model different sizes?
Thank you. Recent research from Sub-Saharan South Africa focuses on developing small capacity dryer technologies that can be affordable and suitable for the smallholders. So a community where we assess the average yield for every farmer and we use their average in calibrating for the 3 ton. And it's proven that it's successful over there. Thank you. Yes, we took the average. We did a sampling and we took the average each smallholder farmer. A smallholder farmer has a capacity of, let's say, 1 hectare. So the average yield, that was what we use in calibrating for the 3 ton dryer. And we also did a performance analysis on it, and it's tried and tested and it's worked perfectly.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid we are out of time. One final, okay, you go for it. I had a question, but you can take my question. You can take my
Very well. I've come again. Those who did the work on the tomato contamination, are you just concerned about the contamination on the surface of the fruit or the bioaccumulants in the food material? I want to know, because if it's just contamination on the food surface, that with some hygiene, with some improved hygiene, that's what we can solve. But the way those that find themselves into the food material, we cannot easily get rid of them. So what is your take on that? What actually are you targeting? Is it just the contamination on the surface of the fruit?
I wonder
Okay,
if,
thank you.
Loretta, okay, go ahead, go ahead.
Thank you very much, sir. We were targeting the contamination on both the food material and the surface, because with some of the pathogenic microorganisms, they are heat resistant. So if we are to look at source of heat, can get rid of them. But then since we were looking at the pathogenic microorganisms that actually are in the food material, so meaning only cooking or source of heat can't get rid of them. So we need to actually pay attention to it.
Thank you very much, Loretta. And thank you to all our presenters. Can you give them a round of applause?